Phil Akers here. Oh,
Yeah.
hi there, guys. Phil Akers here, senior coach at the Belfry, and I'm joined today by Dan Adams, who's a doctor of elite sport and performance. Really honoured to have him here to talk us through his thoughts. And today we're going to be covering how to practice effectively. Something that's really apparent when I get people come in for golf lessons, Dan, is that sort of they just do the same thing over and over, and then they're expecting different results. Or like we'll have maybe talked a little bit about making a swing change, and sort of like they'll have seen it, they'll have been physically put in the positions that we want them to be in, and then they come back after 2 weeks, a month, or whatever, and they haven't made them changes. And I kind of want you to sort of go into today potentially why they're not making them changes when they have maybe pounded 1,000 golf balls down the driving range of it. Why is that swing change maybe not come to fruition with it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what's important for the viewers to realise that there are different stages of learning, which means there are also different stages of training. And unfortunately for the majority of the golfers, they just stay at stage one, level one. They stay at the elementary stage, when you're just trying to learn the skill. But unfortunately, that's not enough. We need to then adapt and modify how we practice in relation to what we're trying to do with that skill.
Mm-hmm.
So an acronym that I use is ART, ART. So that stands for skill acquisition, skill retention, skill transfer. And depending on where you are along that continuum is where you want to adopt and alter your practice accordingly. Mm-hmm. So skill acquisition might be the elementary stage. And that doesn't mean that it's only relevant to the beginner golfer. This could also be relevant to the elite golfer, the tour player who's learning a new skill, mm-hmm. a new wrist position, a new elbow position. If it's something new that you've not done before, it's something new. You're trying to acquire that new skill. So when you're at that stage, you want the learning environment to be as easy as possible, because it's already hard enough to get the new skill, to learn the new technique that you're trying to achieve. So the learning environment needs to be as easy as possible. And that's what we largely see when we see players practicing on the range. It's a nice flat mat, lots of golf balls, shot after shot after shot, no real target. And, if they're getting a lesson with the coach will be giving them lots and lots of feedback, really helping them achieve it, do it more, do it less. Really, really trying to make it as easy as possible.
And that's a safe environment, yeah.
Absolutely, because like I said, we're trying to experiment and we're trying to achieve. Can we just get there? Can we just arrive at the skill? Can we just move your elbow position from here to here? Can you do it? And once we know, right, you know what? Once we get to the stage where you go, look, you can do it, and you know you can do it, and you know where it needs to be. We just need to get you better at doing it. And that's one of the common things with golfers is they go, well, I can do it on the range, but when I get out on the course, I just can't do it. So now it's not a question of, I wonder if you can do it. We know you can do it, but can you do it now in the relevant conditions? Which is now when we go to stage 2, the skill retention as a whole, we're trying to make practice now much more challenging. We're trying to make the brain work harder to recall and retain that skill or access that skill. So how we do that is, well, we change the club, we have a target, we give less feedback, we make different shots of different conditions, and then that's kind of the basic stuff. Like a lot of people might be aware about already is we need to make practice harder. One of the elements that a lot of people miss out is time, and I'm not talking about time as in how long you spend bashing golf balls, like you say, hitting thousands of golf balls in the space of an hour. That's actually not relevant at all to how we play golf, because we don't do that on the course. I'm talking about the time frame interval gaps in between shots. So if we look at when you play on a golf course, well, let's just take driving, for example. You say, I want to improve my driving. The first hole, you might hit driver. In relation to time frame, when is the next time you use that club? It might not be until the third hole, which could be 45 minutes later. So on the first hole, let's say you hit, you pull your shot left, or you slice it off right. Now, you don't get to try to fix that or alter that or adjust it until 45 minutes later. Now, that is a lot trickier to do. When standing on the range, you hit a shot that goes slightly left, and then 5 seconds later, when the feeling is very, very fresh, you rake a ball and you tweak it because the feeling is super fresh. You can alter and adjust the feeling, and it's down the middle. So that gives you a false sense of achievement.
Yeah.
And it's not really relevant, it's not really practical, it's not really appropriate to how we play on the course. So those time frame gaps in between shots is essential, because ultimately that's what we're trying to get you to do. We're trying to get you to be the best at hitting that shot one off, one chance, one opportunity, not in stage one where we tweak, and after the 10th effort, we've got it. And it's like, well, taking you 9 previous attempts.
Yeah.
Can't do that on the course.
I think that comes down to sort of like these stages of learning, right? Where you've got this bit where you understand it, but you can't do it. Yeah.
That's it. That's it.
I always think about that, sort of like how I learned how to drive my car. Like I knew how to change the gear, like my instructor had told me, and I knew how to put my foot on the accelerator and the clutch, but I just couldn't quite get the timing right of it. And you'd stall it. Yeah. So that's how sort of like people down the driving range, when Tiger Woods learned something new, or when I learned something new, or when Average Joe learned something new, we all sort of like go through that same sort of state. It's tricky. It takes a lot of repetition. It takes a lot of conscious thought, right?
Absolutely.
But then 100 miles down the road, you kind of start to get it, yeah? You can sort of like, you understand what you're doing, and you can sort of make that movement, but you still got to think about it that little bit. So it's not to say on practice that you shouldn't just, that you should just hit golf balls. You need that conscious bit. And in that point, it kind of doesn't matter, let's say, if your focus was on that right arm, as you say, it then doesn't matter if you hit the ball flush or anything like that. It matters. You're focusing more on, are you getting that correct position that you're looking for, right? So when people do try and make a swing change out of a golf lesson and just expect it to go like that, it doesn't work like that, does it?
Absolutely not. We've got to, the brain remembers what you've done the most, not most recent.
Yes.
So if the most you've come over the top, for example, or you've got a high elbow or whatever the technical fault is, if that's what you've done the most, that's what the brain will go to when it's stressed, when it's fatigued, when it's in a state of fear. It will go to what it's comfortable and what it's strongest at doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that pathway that you create of being able to then do it. And then ultimately, as you say, sort of like, I can now get in the car and change gear without even thinking about it. I can just go. So that's that unconscious part of it. But I've had to go through them different stages, right?
Absolutely.
The average golfer doesn't want to go through them stages. They want to see that end stage straight away. And that's where changing up this practice, adding that spacing into it, maybe adding a little bit of variability into it, maybe going from like a putt to a chip, so then go back to that drive.
Absolutely.
Is huge, and I never see it down the driving range with your average amateur. They normally just hit a ball, break another one, hit a ball.
It's what they only know of, but it's also very comfortable. Like I explain this to elite golfers, and they agree. Well, I definitely need to do this. I need to be better at one-off doing it, and they agree, but then they don't apply it. Because, it just doesn't feel like I'm practicing. It's like, well, you're doing exactly what you do on the course, and that's the point of practice, really, is to make it. We have to make practice as relevant to how we perform and play in tournaments.
But what you're saying there isn't that they don't need lots of repetitions or something, because obviously, like waiting 45 minutes to hit a drive all the time doesn't create a lot of repetitions. But that first part of that learning, you do need lots of repetition of it, don't you? It should be easy. It should be on that flat line. That's where you are gaining sort of like them first connections. You're building them, and you need that. But then what we're sort of saying is that as you progress on, you shouldn't just be doing 100 drives in a row or 100 7-irons at the 150 marker. Exactly. You need to then start to transfer that and make that, or building that retention, as it were, where you can go from one skill to the next and still complete what you've been learning.
Absolutely, 100%. You're dead right there. And that's the whole key point. It's not just one or the other. There might be times when you need to spend time in the acquisition stage when you're trying to learn something new. So do your block practice, stand in the nets, get lots of feedback, hit shot after shot after shot. But if you are a golfer who knows, right, I can do this, I'm not trying to discover the new technique. I know it's there. I just need to access it more in the relevant conditions. So we need to create the relevant conditions, and one of them would be time. One of them would be, one shot, one chance, different lies, different angles, And then that leads me then to the final stage, really, which is the transfer. It's the ability to access the skill in different environments now. So I'll give you an example. There's a senior golfer who I work with, and he can strike the ball, he can hit it reasonably well, but he's only ever hit golf balls on the driving range. He's been on the course a handful of times, but he lives on the range, and he lives on one particular mat also. So his learning environment is the same. Now, there's a rule within skill acquisition which goes along the lines of the environment in which you learn the skill is where the skill will show up the strongest. It's where it will perform the strongest. So if you learn that skill, if you learn that swing and you learn that shot on that particular driving range on that mat, that's where it's going to show up. Now, one winter, it was very snowy, very cold. So I moved my coaching into an indoor studio, and I invited him along for a session, and he'd never hit balls indoors. And as soon as you walk through the door, it was like he just stepped on the moon. He was like, whoa, this is crazy. Like, I can hear music. There's walls. There's a ceiling. What's this net? And like, he didn't even realize that when you hit the ball just hits the net and falls down. He thought the ball catapulted back and he had to move up the way. I was like, no. So got him on the mat and said, let's see how you get on. First swing, he totally missed the ball. Next swing, topped it, shanked it, off the toe, shanked it. Now and again, he'd find the strike, but it was more than not. He could barely strike the ball. And it was because the learning environment was so different. He could not access the skill. We knew the skill was there. It's not like he has to change the swing and figure out a new technique and go back to stage one. He just needs to be better at accessing the skill in a different environment.
So how do you suggest then that we create a different environment? Once we've gone through these first two stages of learning, okay, how do we then start to create that pressure? How do we then start to sort of actually see if you've retained that information and that you can do it in these different environments? Then how would you suggest that your average golfer practices?
I would look at this. For me, there's initially, as I think about it, there are three different areas. I'd go the literal environment, so the grass, the conditions, the time, and then the weather conditions. So go to the environment first of all. What type of land and environment are you hitting from? So if you're just hitting from a mat, well, that's different to hitting from grass. Well, what type of grass? Wet grass, dry grass, long grass, short grass, flat land, undulated. So straight away, I can go, wow, okay, I take a lot of my plays onto the beach and getting them hitting balls there. Because one, it's great if you can strike a ball off sand, brilliant. But also, we are broadening their environmental stimulus. We are really pushing the boundaries here. They can hear the ocean. They can feel the wind on their face much stronger than the wind on the golf course. But that's one example, changing the environment. So the second one was time. And again, not time as in how many golf balls you're hitting, the time of day. And I always use the example of, imagine if you only ever played golf at 1 p.m. in the afternoon, and you played so well and practiced so well, you reach professional level and you actually win a place in the Open Championship. And they give you your tee time and it's 6:30 in the morning. Now, we know the skills there at this professional. He's good enough to play in the Open, or she's good enough to play in the Open. But are they good enough? And have they got the ability to access the skill in that at that time frame? Bearing in mind, they've never done it. My money would be, well, there's a good chance they probably won't, because I've experienced it when you're at the range there at like 5:30 in the morning. It is pitch black. They have to use floodlights. Everybody is frozen, and you're just trying to stay alive. Never mind access the swing. So it's whether that person can access it. So I'd suggest broadening when your time frame. If you only ever play golf at 1 in the afternoon with your friends, you probably don't need to. But the point is can you access the swing under different conditions? Yeah. And then obviously weather's another one. We all know I can play great in the nice, calm, relaxing weather, blue skies, sun's cracking the flags. But can you access it in gale force winds, in the rain? And that's what makes the guys under those conditions. Wouldn't it be beneficial to practice under those conditions?
So for me, that comes down to sort of like, do people actually practice on the golf course enough as well? Sort of like in this final stage, because nothing quite replicates the golf course like the golf course, right? Like you get different winds, different lies, like you can go out different times of the day. Like it's naturally got all of that built in. So the driving range is so far removed from it.
Absolutely.
And it's such a safe environment. So for them first two stages of learning, it's great for me and you to be able to teach someone in that environment, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's that transfer. It's being able to create that, and you can actually make the course so much harder as well, or so much easier. Like, you know, if we want someone to learn how to get comfortable making birdies, let's say, rather than focusing on their swings and stuff, we can say if you hit the fairway, okay, well you can move. I don't know, you can throw it closer to the hole as far as you can, or if you hit a green in regulation, you move it one putt length closer. But equally, we can make it harder as well. But you're still in that environment which is so random and so varied, and you've got that natural spacing and challenge point to it. And I think you know, when people do come out of this lockdown and they've maybe done so much of that technical practice and they've maybe got that skill down in a safe environment, don't just expect it to transfer straight away out onto the golf course, because
it's a different environment. It's just,
you
know, if you're learning to swim, if you said I wanted to be an Ironman, I want to do a triathlon, well, they've got to swim in the sea. So there's waves, there's seaweed, there may even be jellyfish and sharks. You're not going to get that in your local swimming pool. So you can say, I'm great at swimming in my local leisure pool where there are no waves, but it's a different. When I go in the water in the sea, it's like, well, the waves are splashing into me. It's disrupting my flow. Well, unfortunately, that's the name of the game.
Yeah.
And you need to adapt to it and learn to access your skill under those conditions.
I think that's it. As golfers, I think that we should become far more focused on sort of being adaptable. And I think it was Adam Young that said, your job is to be a chameleon and to be adaptable to these different situations and figure out the answer to them. Yeah, it's not just to practice in these safe environments and become really good at hitting that 7-iron to the 150-yard marker, because unfortunately you're going to be into the wind, downwind, like you're going to have different lies, you're going to be in different sort of pressure situations. So it's your job to actually experience as many of them different environments as you possibly can, and the golf course does that, right?
Yeah, all day long, absolutely. If you relate it to football, you know, you don't really see footballers practicing. Obviously, they have their set pieces, but in the actual game, it's never as neat and as tidy as when they do practice on the train. It's scruffy. Someone slips over. Someone's timing was out. Someone's position's in a different position. It's never as neat and as tidy as what you think.
Absolutely. So then sort of like in this time, I mean, like this is how we can practice effectively. So people have got so much time on their hands and they don't have access to the outside world at the moment, and golf courses and that. So how would you suggest that people sort of, if they have made like a bit of a swing there or something like that, how would you say that they do go about practicing most effectively at the moment then?
So I would relate it back to time again, because first of all, I think that's the component a lot of people miss out. Obviously, we can't really do much with the environment. You're kind of limited with your net. But let's say you have a particular position or a particular technique you're trying to achieve, and you can do that in the net, video record it, and use that as evidence to say, yeah, this is what it looks like when it's at its best. This is where I want it to be. Right. Okay, well, that's just taking you 10 swings to get there. Let's see if you can now have a 10-minute break, go make a cup of tea, come back, and you're going to have one shot, one chance to try and access it. Video record it and see the differences. And let's say it's your elbow position. Let's say you're trying to get away from a really high right elbow and you want it much tighter, much neater on the body. And when you hit lots of shots, you get it. But when you had that 10-minute gap, you were only halfway there. Okay, so now we're going to have another 10-minute gap. But when you come back this time, what do you think you need to tell yourself? I need to keep it even tighter. Right, let's do it. And then let's see if you can have a 10, 15-minute gap where you walk in, video record it, and you do it. Now, that one shot, for me, is worth hitting 50 golf balls, shot to shot to shot. So it's a way in which you can actually practice less, but get a lot more out of it, because it's a lot more relevant and appropriate to tournament golf.
I love that. And I think some really nice stuff that I've sort of seen is when people start to then add layers and different challenges into that. So they might have, say, like a little putting mat down there. They might have sort of like a chip in their back garden where they could just chip into a 10-yard bucket challenge or something.
Yeah.
then be able to go back and see if they do create that movement. Okay, and that's where sort of this rehearsals, I think, can play a big part in this. A lot of people come in and you'll see them hit golf balls, and there's no rehearsals whatsoever, like in routines and stuff like that. And they'll just shell off golf balls. Whereas if you ever sort of go to like a tour event like yourself and you sort of see how these best players in the world practice, I mean, like, I see loads of exaggerations of movements. Do you not?
All day long. And in fact, it's quite, I joke about with the club level golfers when I am coaching them, because I am begging them to make a practice swing. Whereas when you're working with the tour players, I'm begging them to hit the ball. Like, I'm sick of watching them making practice. It's like, come on, hit the shot, will you? It's like, that's the point. And when we have this space and variability, if you're going to hit one shot after having a 15-minute gap, you'll go into that with a really fresh mind, and you want to guarantee if that shot was worth £10 million and you had to do it, would you just walk up and hit it without your brain really switched on? Mm-hmm. No, you'd be totally on it, totally aware, right? What have I got to do? I've got to keep this elbow tight, right? Here's 3 or 4, 5, 6, 7 practice swings where I'm really feeling what I need to feel. Now I'm going to try and execute it.
Yeah. I think that's a huge part of it, being very clear on what you're trying to do, not trying to change something every single time, which is just your typical golfer, right? Sort of like, oh, that one didn't work, I topped that. So next one, okay, well, I'll go high with my right elbow. Oh, that one didn't work, I'll go back to
absolutely. That's just
constantly trying to build a different pathway, rather than just becoming good at one thing. Rather than becoming good at that movement and then adapting that movement to the situation. Which
100%. I 100% agree there. And one of the issues with that is a player who just jumps around thinks, oh, that didn't work. How do you know that did not work? How do you know that your elbow was or was not in that particular place? That's part of the issue. The coach has laid out a particular pathway for you to go along because he knows what's going on. The issue with the golfer is that they do not know. They have less awareness of, did I do it or didn't I do it?
What's real is so different, right?
That's the point, exactly. So whether the elbow is the right thing or the wrong thing, as the player, part of the issue is that you're not aware whether you're doing it anyway. So the golfer who's chopping and changing, I go, the grip didn't work that time, that stance didn't work that time. Well, actually, how do you know you actually did it? That's part of the issue. That's part of the point as well.
That feedback is just so huge, and I think that's what I'd sort of urge all amateurs to try and do in this time. Like, you've got so much access to sort of like cool apps where you can video it, you can send sort of like videos to your coach if you wanted to, or whatever it is, but you don't necessarily see the outcome at the moment, which is really empowers a lot of golfers to make their swing changes that they've always wanted to make. Once you can start to make that movement, like, can you start to do it without so much thought? Can you do it more so sort of like, can you think about it before and then try and do it more over the actual shot? Because ultimately, like, that's where we want to be. If I started thinking about how my foot works on my clutch now and how my gear changes, it'd probably become a bit jiggedy. It would probably go worse than when I don't think about it. So ultimately, we are trying to reach this unconscious competence phase of learning. But down the driving range, people just don't do that. They don't get to this point of unconscious competence because that's not what they're practicing.
Exactly. That's a key point. We'd all like to be at the point where we don't need to think about it. And for me, really, that can come in 3 ways. One way definitely does not work, where I have to think about it, and now I'm going to decide I'm not going to think about it. I'm just going to go and swing. That way very rarely works. One of the other ways is similar to what you said there about driving. To start with, you are thinking about it, and then naturally it starts to become subconscious. You haven't forced it. It can't just go through time. You don't even realize, oh, I'm not even having to think about it now. And then the alternative way is consciously, slowly modifying it. And what I mean by that is there's a way where you can measure and monitor whether you can not think about it. Place your attention externally, maybe on the flag or what have you. And how I would have a golfer do that is for every 10 golf balls, think about it for 9, and then on the 1, think of something external.
Yeah.
And then monitor it and measure it and see. So maybe if you want to use video analysis, if you want to use tracking, whatever your feedback system is. But the point is we want to cross-reference and say, right, can I externally focus on the flag and still hit the numbers and appropriate.
I think that's a really nice thing now that, I mean, like, it's so easy, especially when you get into pressure situations, right? Imagine that you're coming down the final couple of holes of club championships and you're one shot in the lead, and that's often the time that we then start to think more about things, right? As well,
Yep.
rather than if you've got some cold, hard evidence that you don't need to think that hard about it, like you can just swing and sort of like, that's just what you can fire, then that gives you so much confidence. Okay. So I sort of I had a pro in who, whenever he got under that bit of pressure, I mean, like, he's playing for his living, right? He's always playing under pressure, but it sort of, the more pressure he fell under, the more he started thinking about it, and the worse his performances got. So we sort of tried to layer up that pressure with it, but we did try and get him to go to that external focus of attention where it was, you know, like I'd ask him a question, or I'd have to, I don't know, think about the different colours of the rainbow or something as he swung, something completely different, not swing related whatsoever. And he was amazed in seeing that actually sort of like his numbers that he was creating when he was thinking about it were basically exactly the same as when he wasn't thinking about it. And it's like, well, why is that 90% of my focus when I'm out